Welcome to the Bixby Partner Panel. Woo. So glad you could join us today for what we think will be an interesting and entertaining session. My name is Jennifer Arnold, and I lead partner engineering at Samsung's Viv Labs, where our mission is to help strategic partners design and develop compelling Bixby voice integrations for their services. As we all know, voice assistant usage and adoption is on the rise, with approximately 2 out of 3 people using voice assistants on a weekly basis. In addition, the number of different device types that are voice assistant enabled continues to grow. What started largely with smart speakers and smartphones has expanded to include things like smart TVs, smart appliances, automobiles, wearables, hearables, and many other types of devices. And probably most important for all of us here today, the number of voice-enabled services and the voice app ecosystem is also growing, bringing new consumer experiences, driving even more user engagement, and offering a new channel for companies to offer their services to their customer base. So in terms of our panel today, we have 4 Bixby partners that it has been a pleasure working with. And they come from and they come from all differing market segments. We have a large visual search and discovery partner. We have an innovator bringing voice content from news and magazines from hundreds of different well-known publishers. We have a super cool startup bringing interactive voice games, and a leading online retailer paving the way through conversational commerce. So I think what I'd like to do is start off by asking each of you to please introduce yourselves and tell the audience a bit about what you do.
I'm Blake. I work at Pinterest, which is a visual search and discovery engine that reaches 300 million plus monthly active users and helps our users find the inspiration they need to lead a life they love. I specifically work and lead mobile and international business development, including our partnership with Samsung.
Nice. I'm Max. I'm one of the co-founders of Volley. We make games and entertainment for voice devices. We have one of the most popular games on Alexa and Google, and soon to be Bixby, hopefully, which is a name that tune music game called Song Quiz. And then we also make sort of entertainment, daily short podcasts, including daily vocabulary word, daily horoscopes, daily jokes, that kind of thing. And so that's what we're launching on Bixby today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Susan Hui. I'm the Director of Innovation and Growth Products at 1-800-Flowers. And for those of you who are not familiar with the Flowers brand, we're a gifting and floral company. And some of the brands that we own are, of course, 1-800-Flowers.com, Harry and David, Cheryl's Cookies, and Sherry's Berries. I lead and oversee the development and go-to-market strategy for emerging products and platform, of which includes conversational commerce.
My name is Will Mayo. I am the founder of Spoken Layer. We are an audio platform that focuses exclusively on short-form content and short-form audio, and we handle the creation, distribution, and monetization of that for most of the major media partners. And we're really excited actually today to bring the first 5 media partners over to Bixby.
Okay, I think what I want to do is start off with a question that I think would be interesting for the audience here. If you could talk a little bit about how is your company utilizing voice as part of its overall strategy to reach your consumers, your customers, and to also drive brand awareness and promote your brand? Whoever wants to go first.
I can talk about it. So obviously we're 100% focused on short-form audio, of which voice is a predominant distribution method. And we're the back-end company that helps a lot of brands that want to figure this out and get into it. So that's kind of been actually almost the past decade of my life has been in short-form audio storytelling. So audio is emotional. Audio is intimate. Audio is one of the things that you can't touch, you can't see, you can't feel, but it's incredibly powerful. I think that's one of the reasons why it's been hard for people to get into, because it literally isn't something you can look at on a PowerPoint slide or you can touch or you can feel. But everyone in this room knows that audio has a really important impact on their life. And how to get into that is something where I think that's one of the reasons why people have been hesitant or unclear how to step into it, because there aren't perfect ways to do it. There aren't perfect steps. So helping a brand or a media company or a storyteller or a gaming company get into that and understand how to enter that and how to understand to be part of that habit and to be part of that intimacy is something that I think is really important and really valuable. But I think that's part of, all of us have these really powerful experiences and that lead to buying, that lead to entertainment, that lead to delight. And how do you integrate those in a medium that is almost anti-technology? So I think that's been part of the piece, is how do you slowly step there? How do you start proving something, start repeating it, and then start iterating on it? And I think that's one of the things we found. I think, I'm trying to remember, it was only a couple months ago when we first started playing with Bixby. It was one of the fastest platforms for us to integrate on because of the tools you guys have built and because of how open you guys have been around not saying, here's how you do it. It's, here's a way to do it, but let's work together to figure that out.
And I completely echo that and I agree with that. Because of the Bixby developer studio, it allowed us to really build a voice experience that's very seamless and very assistive in a sense. So for flowers, it's very clear the two intents that we try to address. It's really helping our customer send flowers and then providing that post-transactional experience, which is providing order status information or answering any FAQs that you might have about ordering. So for us, our two intents are very assistive in a way and not intrusive. So it's helping someone send flowers and then providing that transactional experience.
Yeah, I mean, so we are a voice-native company. I guess all of our products are voice-driven. We got started on voice platforms, and everything we make is controlled by, and the output is also voice and audio. So we're obviously big believers in voice as an interface. We think a couple of the things we discovered in the gaming area that are sort of the coolest about it is that, first of all, it appeals to the very young and the very old in a way that other platforms are maybe harder to use. We have literally 4- and 5-year-olds playing our games on platforms, and we also have 88-year-olds playing, and we think they can also play together sometimes, and I get emails from those people, so it's pretty cool. That's awesome. And so that's really unusual, and then also, sort of the fact that you can have a live multiplayer experience. I kind of alluded to that, but a lot of our games sort of replace the board game or the party game experience, or the family dinner, that kind of thing. And so we think voice is inherently social in a way that kind of other technology platforms haven't been. So we're super excited.
I have a quick question on that.
Yeah, yeah.
I think you've done some visuals, I've
Yeah.
noticed,
Yeah,
on
yeah,
some
yeah.
platforms. Like, do you have plans to kind of scale that up in any way across the different devices? Because obviously, more and more devices, it feels like, are starting to also have screens as a complement.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that at all?
Yeah, I think we're big believers in visuals as, sort of an augmentation of a voice experience. Right now, like, you and I are talking, we're having a voice experience, but
Right.
we're also looking at each other, right? So it still works, right? We don't have to, like, literally tap each other to communicate, right? So yeah, I think we're really excited about the television as a place where you could have voice-controlled entertainment with, a visual background. You can have smart speakers with more visual interfaces contributing to a voice experience, and then obviously, the mobile phone, similarly. So we think voice as a control mechanism can span all these different contexts, all these different devices, visuals or not, and we're excited to sort of be everywhere there's voice control.
And voice for Pinterest is actually a new input method that we're really excited to test and learn from. It's not something that we've done on our own platform or with other third-party platforms before. So definitely taking this as a learning experience. And I think for us, we really wanted to see how we can continue to bring inspiration and allow people to try this as a new input method. Maybe I'm in the kitchen and I want to find a new recipe, or I'm at the gym and I want to find new fitness tips. So we're really excited, because we're all about bringing inspiration to our pinners. We really think that this new voice input is another way that they'll be able to interact with Pinterest as a platform.
Yeah, another thing I noticed just interacting with the capsule, the Pinterest capsule, is that search is so much easier with voice. Like, if I just want to say something and it might be complicated or simple or whatever it is, I don't have to type it in. I just noticed right off the bat that was one of the huge benefits around searching for things, just using natural language.
Yeah, definitely.
So Susan, I kind of wanted to go back to you. So you launched your capsule, I believe it was at the very end of January of this year.
Valentine's Day.
Right, before Valentine's Day, just before. And so you've been in the market, it's been in the market for a while now. You were one of the first partners to integrate with our Samsung payment service. And so what that's allowed is users to be able to make purchases, to buy flowers, all within Bixby using their cards they already have on file in Samsung Pay. I guess what I kind of wanted to hear from you was any feedback on that, and then also, given that you're in this space, you're kind of unique from some of the other partners up here, given that it's a highly transactional experience. Can you talk at all about consumer adoption, what you've seen with voice shopping, and just not only with your service, but in general?
Yeah, of course. So with buying flowers and gifting in general, there's an anxiety of picking that perfect gift, right? Like, will this person like it? But then I don't even know where to send it or when to send it. Will this person be home? So that anxiety kind of like persists regardless of what modal you use to shop for the gift. So with voice, it kind of helps us remove some of that by allowing the customer also see it on the screen. So on Bixby today, you can say, hey, I'm looking for some red roses. So then Bixby will pull up an assortment of red roses that you might be interested in purchasing. But from there, it also shows you a picture, because a picture is worth 1,000 words. There's no way I can describe to you what the bouquet will look like, what types of flowers are in this bouquet, and how it's arranged. Because just by those factors, it actually, they all express flowers in their own way, depending on the way it's arranged, the color palettes, right? So this picture on the phone screen really augment that experience for us. So with that, it also, Bixby's a lot pulling also the contact information that's saved on your phone. So you won't have to input, say, your mom's address or your sister's address. All you have to do is tell Bixby, hey, I want to send it to my sister, Sarah. And boom, everything's pre-populated. And at the very end, you check out seamlessly with Samsung Pay. And all you have to do is enter your PIN. And so there's no excuse for anyone in here why you guys are not sending flowers. And we're also running a promotion for
Have you thought at all about, I'm sure you have, because one of the announcements we made today was that developers can now build for targeting multiple devices like TV and fridge and others. Have you thought at all about what that experience could look like on some of these other devices?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is going to be very powerful in the way we want to scale with Bixby. Because, for example, say the calendar is being shown on your refrigerator right now with the screen, and you see it's your mom's birthday today. You're like, oh, shoot, I completely forgot to send her a gift. And, like, how am I going to get it to her? She's, like, all the way across the country in New York. But guess what? With flowers, you have same-day delivery. And boom, all you have to do is do the exact transaction I just described, and you're done. And flowers saves the day, right?
So Max, so your song quiz game and some of the others have become extremely popular. And on a personal note, I'm a huge fan of Song Quiz.
All right, good.
I won't say the decade.
Oh, you want to say decade? Which decade you play? All right.
Yeah. No, I'm not going there.
We'll find out later.
Can you talk a little bit about kind of the development process from your perspective and how it might be different? Let's say there's game developers, but they haven't really started developing for voice. What kinds of things should they think about, and how should they think differently around designing a voice game versus traditional online game or other?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously sort of a lot of notes to it. I think one really key thing that's different from other kind of game platforms is you just have to have an extremely limited user interface at any given moment, right? I mean, you can really just ask people one question essentially, and maybe you can have 3 options. Maybe in the case of 5 decades, we can say 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and you would know what all those were. But one of the big sort of crutches of game design, and also really just all user interface design, is, well, I can just throw more buttons on the screen, or I can just do a giant list where you can pick 12 things out of, or I can show you a huge spreadsheet of numbers in the context of a game with all your stats and everything. And you really just can't do any of that on voice. Yeah, right. So you might be able to do it with some of these visual experiences we're talking about, but you have to design the whole experience as literally I can only ask the exact right question at this moment. And so obviously, when you're setting up a game, it's sort of more intuitive. How many people are playing? What decade do you want to play? That kind of thing. But overall, I think it's sort of very constraining because you can't have a menu, you can't have a browsing, you can't read people lists. And so the writing quality and the timing of how you design your interface and what questions you ask at exactly which moment is super important. And that's something like, I think we're decent at, but we're always trying to get better. And I think that the whole kind of industry has to reorient around these extremely sort of linear focused user interfaces to create a good voice experience.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, Will?
Yeah, one of the things, it's interesting you say that a lot of what we think about is actually undesigning the experiences, because people are so used to like, what else can I put in there? What are all the things? And it's almost this constantly ask about, what can I take out? And you always have to ask that question at every iteration, like, do I need 3 options? Well, if only 10% of the users are actually doing it, great, just make the choice for them. And I think it's that thing where in the world of voice, paradox of choice is exponentially worse, because if you ask someone a question and they're not sure, stop is most likely going to be the answer, as opposed to making a tough decision. So I think it's so true of how do you remove questions and remove that and assume one path, and if they're smart, if they've used it enough, give them an option to know as a super user that they can do something else, but assume that they don't know what to do. It's a really...
We definitely had that realization when we were building as well. There's so many things that you can do on the Pinterest platform, and realistically, you can't have all of those as options on voice. And I think we really had to pick and choose what the right interaction types were. And I think we're excited to test. We've put in our upcoming capsule, we have one, search being the primary action that users can take. But there might be other ones that users might like in the future. We'll just have to continue to test and see what users like. But definitely paring down all of the features that are available on Pinterest as a platform into a voice capsule was a difficult thing that we had to decide on.
It's a good point, though, because around this iteration, right? One of the beauties of software is you can iterate, you can test, you can see how it goes, and we can also, obviously through our close collaboration, we can say, you know what? If everyone's dying to pin something with Bixby, maybe we should, add that functionality, for instance, or, add a certain element of whatever, multiplayer games, in the case of, Volley. There's so many things that we can do, but I think it makes sense to start off with a kind of a more of a narrowed scope, see how it goes, see what users are naturally asking for from a voice perspective, and then just taking it from there, so.
Yeah, it's like uncomfortably simple is the place to start.
So I guess, I kind of a follow-up question for you. I mean, obviously, you've kind of alluded to this already, but, Pinterest is obviously a highly visual experience. I guess for developers that might be also interested in taking their visual service or highly multimodal service and kind of bringing that to more of a voice-first type interface or type experience, do you have any guidance for developers who might be in the audience on what things to consider?
Yeah, so I think for us, this was really thinking about input versus output. And input and kind of getting to the point of inspiration and discovery on Pinterest happens in a lot of different ways. It happens by somebody typing in Thanksgiving recipes. We also have built something called Pinterest Lens, which is taking a photo and then matching that photo with similar ideas and images on Pinterest. So and then obviously we've built third-party extensions in the past. We have an extension on Facebook Messenger. So we've tried with different modes of input before, and I think giving users options really benefited us there, because there's lots of different ways in which people might input what they're looking for on Pinterest. And I think on the output side, the output is certainly visual, and I think what's really interesting in working with Samsung is that there's so many amazing device types in media to display Pinterest's visual nature, whether that's on mobile devices, smart home appliances, TVs. So I think we're really excited about how users are actually going to interact with the inspiration they're finding on Pinterest across those range of devices.
Yeah, and I was thinking about this too, because it might be different, right? If I'm in the kitchen making dinner, I might be searching naturally for different things than if I'm sitting watching TV or I'm on my mobile on the go. So I think it will be interesting to see, as we look at scaling beyond the mobile, how people are interacting differently depending on the context, right, and the device type.
Yeah, absolutely. Pinterest has such a wealth of content across different verticals, And some verticals might be really well geared towards mobile, others towards TV, and others
Right.
towards home appliances. So it'll be really interesting to see, when we do launch, to see how users are experiencing that inspiration across the different types of devices.
Yeah. Will, so many of us, myself included, have kind of experienced the transition from print to online content consumption.
Yep.
Can you talk at all about, how have you seen the content consumption, trends changing? And also, given your close interaction with all these publishers, how are they trying to adjust their behavior and their approach to address this shift?
Yeah, so I think I always like to give this little framework first before I answer that question, because I think media kind of moves in 3 phases. The first one is actually the first 2 you just mentioned, which is a physical thing. So whether it's a physical newspaper, an actual LP, or a terrestrial radio broadcast, or a TV broadcast, or going to a movie theater, there's something physical that takes work to distribute, and it actually has tangibility to it. The second phase, which is, you said, a digital version, going to the website of a publisher, or downloading an album, or downloading a TV show. But then everything changes because those 2 phases are controlled by the content creator. The packaging, how it's distributed, when it comes out, how how you get it all is all controlled by the person who's creating the media. But in the third version, everything gets broken apart. Every song is distributed on its own. Every photo is distributed on its own. Every article is distributed on its own, and it gets broken apart into little pieces. And the packaging of it is based on what someone searches for Pinterest, or the playlist they built on Spotify, or their endless feed of news on Facebook, or on Twitter, or on Netflix, or YouTube, or wherever it is. And that's really uncomfortable for media companies because they're used to controlling their distribution. So there's almost a giving up of control, or almost a selflessness as you move into a new medium where the consumer's in control. And what's powerful is the story they have to tell, the brand they have, and the perspective, as opposed to necessarily their packaging or distribution. And that's already hard when it's changing with digital or with print. But now you're adding something where not only are you losing control, but you can't even see it anymore in the world of audio. It's really uncomfortable. They know they have written under control. They're starting to figure out video, and they know they need to do stuff with listening. There's been some podcasting, and now a lot of people are getting into short form, but bridging into that is something that I think is part of where our job is to understand what's possible. What can we do? A lot of what I think is really cool that you guys have is the number of devices. So when someone goes into a home, hopefully early next year, we'll make it so they can walk to their fridge and say, hey, I want to hear the latest from, name your favorite publication. And they can hear that and listen to it, and it's on their fridge, it's on their watch, it's on their phone, it's in their car. So that kind of ambient media experience can be possible. And that's something where a brand like TechCrunch can be pervasive and be everywhere, where you can read it, you can watch it, or you can listen to it. And bridging that gap is, meeting a consumer where they are. For me, the reason I started my company is I'm dyslexic, so I like to listen, or need to listen instead of read. So that was an inspiration for me, but someone's just as impaired when they're driving. It's just temporary. But for me, it's a cognitive versus a temporary one. So I think there's an interesting opportunity there as people are transitioning and changing their perspective and going, okay, my favorite thing is to walk into an editor and said, I've never read your magazine, and I'm never going to, and that's why we should work together. But like, how do we, bring someone into that era, and instead of dragging them in, help it be something they're excited to partner with?
Yeah, it's been really exciting to work with all of you and kind of see, obviously you have different use cases and different challenges and different experiences that, we're able to work on together. I guess with respect to some of the challenges, I would love to hear from any of you around, what are some of we kind of alluded to them already, but like, what are some of the challenges associated with design, development of voice first, or even voice-only applications? I don't know if any of you want to take that.
So, I think we talked about it a little bit earlier. The simplification was definitely a big thing for us. The first action that was ever available on Pinterest was saving to boards, but ultimately we decided that search was going to be, that's now the primary action, and we really felt like that was going to be the one that was most successful. So really paring down all the features that are available on our platform, via our traditional iOS and Android apps, or our web page, really paring that down, I think, was one challenge. And then I also touched on that idea of input versus output. And I think the input here is obviously voice, but the output doesn't have to be voice. And I think Susan alluded to how for flowers, it's really helpful to have a visual output to allow people to make sure they're ordering the right flowers. And Pinterest doesn't really even have the choice to do a voice output. It's going to be visual. So I think really thinking about how do we take the voice input and efficiently and effectively give a visual output and allow people to interact with the content well was definitely a challenge, but I think we figured out a really good first iteration, and I'm excited to get it to market.
Super excited. Yep. Max?
I mean, we talked about like technical and design challenges, so I guess we can also sort of talk about the business side of things a little bit. I mean, I think on voice platforms in general, you're just sort of trying to solve like the 3 key pieces of any successful business: acquisition, retention, monetization, basically, right? So getting new players, making sure they have a great experience and they stay around and keep playing our games or using our stories and podcasts, and then figuring out a way to make money. Obviously, pretty important to having a sustainable company. So I think, Bixby is pretty exciting because I think you guys are, moving the ball forward in terms of discovery. I think that a lot of, the ways people find capsules are a lot more fleshed out even already than some of the other voice platforms. So we're excited to take advantage of that. I think with retention, a lot of it's building a great experience. I mean, obviously something like Pinterest has tremendous long-term retention, so they're probably covered in that case, but figuring out how to do it on a new platform and, the technical pieces of that around, notifications and sort of connecting to other ways we connect with our customers, and then also just building engaging experiences that everyone wants to come back to day after day. And then monetization, talked a little bit about integrating Samsung Pay and sort of direct transactions. Sounds like a very seamless experience. So
I sold it to him.
yeah, you sold it. Yeah. I was
Thank
like,
you.
all right, great, let's do it. I want to implement it today. So I think all those pieces are moving forward. I think that mobile has a 12-year head start on all this stuff, and the web even more. So we'll get there, but I think that that's what we're excited about for the whole industry to keep working on in the next year or 2.
Great.
For us, as of transactional experience, at the end of the day, it's going to be the monetization part, which is the checkout part of the funnel. That's where most of our users actually drop out in the conversion funnel. So with the integration that we have with Samsung Pay, it's made it super seamless. And if you guys get a chance today, definitely stop by the Bixby demo area where you can see how seamless this integration is. And literally, you could just check out in a matter of seconds just by entering your Samsung Pay PIN. I think some of you guys seen it actually. So yeah, I think Bixby has really created a platform that caters to transactional voice experience like ours.
Yeah, it's interesting. Kind of a lot of the things that I think about are actually kind of the 2 extreme ends. So discovery and acquisition is, and even more so on the human side of, this is a new behavior. People are not used to talking to a computer. Like that's new, and I think there's people. I think often we forget that that's changing the way people consume content, interact, and trust. So building that trust takes time, and building that to what am I going to find? Is this a brand I recognize? Okay, I trust 1-800 Flowers because I've heard of it before. But building that authenticity, that trust, and that activation to get someone to actually do something is one. And then monetization, like you talked about, individual transactions are great, but how do we scale that? That's one of the things that we're always looking at as a platform. Like, how can we provide monetization at scale for Volley and hundreds of other companies, for example? Like, how do we think about that? Because there has to be a business case, So we're dealing with 2 macro things here, which is changing a behavior of how people interact and trust content, and building an entire new ecosystem from a scale and monetization. Those are huge problems to solve, which are really fun to attack. And I think it takes both a lot of little pieces and a lot of little companies like ours and a big company like yours to actually move everyone in the same direction and actually keep it focused, because there's so many ways that monetization could happen. There's so many ways discovery and acquisition could happen, and I think the more we're all literally and figuratively speaking the same language in that, the more chance that all of us have at success.
Yeah, I think one of the other challenges around voice is, you have a brand and you want consumers to know they're interacting with your brand, and I would love to hear your perspectives on, like, how do you kind of avoid, how do you make sure the users know that what brand they're interacting with, and how kind of avoid that potential, I don't want to say commoditization, but kind of avoid that, and how do you approach that with voice? Because it's definitely different in a voice-first environment.
I think radio's done a pretty good job over the past 100 years. Like, they remind you what you're listening to.
Over and over again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, it's that simple. I think we all care about all the brands we're working on more than anyone else does, and certainly our users don't care as much as we do, so in certain cases. So they're like, hey, reminding them what they're listening to. It sounds silly because we've heard our own names so many times, but users haven't. So I think, again, that kind of undesigned, like the simple thing is like, just tell them what they're interacting with on a regular basis.
Content is front and center for Pinterest, and I think it's really important for us because our content comes from our Pinner community, because it comes from our partners, whether those are publishers or brands. It's really important to display their content and make it clear that it's coming from this Pinner community, but also let people know, hey, that this is all
Pinterest is
available on
serving this
Pinterest,
stuff,
right?
yeah.
So, if you look at the capsule, which is at the booth, you'll be able to see how the images, the pins themselves are really front and center. And the Pinterest brand is there, but it does take a second seat, a little bit of a back seat, because we want to highlight the wealth of content that's available and really respect the Pinner and publisher community on the platform.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would echo that we repeat the names of our stuff an awful lot.
I noticed that.
It works. It works better. It's not as good as we would like, but it's better. I mean, I think less about brand and more about habit formation. How do people get into habits? I think that people, I think people who play Song Quiz a lot figure out that the name is Song Quiz. I mean, we say it enough times, but also I think getting someone to come back 3, 4, 5, 6 times is sort of the essence to building that brand. And so my understanding of the way you build habits is, the first couple times you need to trigger it somehow. So maybe it's the first time they discover it on the store, but for the second time or the third time, it's either sort of an environmental trigger, so a part of your life where, you might be sitting around the table with your family, or you might be at a party, like we said, and you're saying, oh, let's play Song Quiz again, right? So the first 2 or 3 times, the universe can kind of trigger the habit. And then, the 4th, 5th time, you maybe just sort of get used to it, and then at a certain time of day or in a certain location, you remember like, oh, hey, I want to do that again. And obviously, besides environmental triggers, there's also, push notification triggers and that kind of thing, which can sort of build those first 2 or 3 steps of the habit as well. So we're really focused on building, obviously, great products that people want to come back to over and over again, but that first 2, 3, 4 times where you're building the habit, whether it's a part of your life that triggers it, or it's a notification or some new content or something that triggers it, that's really important for us to have that long-term retention.
Yeah, I was just thinking, one thing that's kind of unique about your games are that you have multiplayer.
Yeah.
And so, which is kind of different than like the typical. So I mean, how have you kind of dealt with kind of design differently the multiplayer versus the single player? And I don't know if you could share any thoughts, insights around that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard. I think we have different types of players. Some people only play the multiplayer experience. Some people only play the single player experience. Some people do both. Some people use different products for different types of their life, parts of their life. So I think our goal is to just create enough different types of entertainment that we can fill different needs for different people at different parts of their life, and hopefully, have something that everyone really enjoys. So it's tough with multiplayer because, like you said, it's the trigger often is I'm around the other people that I played with last time, and sometimes it doesn't happen that often. And so we try to build in single player experiences and other types of entertainment like our our storytelling and our podcast that are more sort of single player habit formation stuff.
I see.
Yeah.
I guess I kind of have one more question. So we have probably a mix of developers and partners in the audience today. Would each of you kind of share your thoughts? Like what specific advice would you give, especially to a developer or trying to get into this space? Because it is still, it's been around for a while, but it is still relatively new compared to some of like the mobile app development community. So I guess it'd be great to hear your perspectives and any advice you might want to share with these developers.
I would say build something that solves a problem within whether your industry or company. Because you don't want to build something for the sake of building, right? You don't want to have a one-hit wonder. You want this thing to stay, and then you just have to iterate the hell out of it until it works. Because voice is here to stay, and that is a statement that you should truly believe in, because I do. And then how can you essentially build something that solves a problem? Because if you don't, it's gonna fail, and it's gonna be a true fail and not a false fail, where you could iterate again and again.
I think building on that, start simple and push it out before you're comfortable. You know, it's that I keep going back to either undesign it or just do one thing. That's it, and have it provide value to someone, and even if it's yourself. But you know, don't be complicated. That's always, it's so much more interesting and alluring to deal with edge cases. Just deal with one path. And then iterate from there.
That's a really good point. That's a good point.
Yeah, I think for us it was building a simple experience and also one that worked both for our really active user base. You know, let's say, you know, we want this experience to be helpful for someone who's remodeling a bathroom and maybe is already really actively using Pinterest in that process, but maybe also be helpful for somebody who planned their wedding on Pinterest a couple of years ago and hasn't interacted with the platform in a while, or maybe hasn't had the chance to do so, but build an experience that's also useful for that audience. So I think what we've managed to build is something that's simple and straightforward for voice as an input, but that also really works across our engagement goals and our acquisition goals.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll give like tactics rather than like let's
Tactics
just
are good too.
Tactics are good, yeah. So let's just assume you have a great product that you know, done. Yeah. Well, I've seen a lot of products I think could have been successful on voice fail, and I think mostly because their tactics were not good. So we'll talk tactics for a second. I think being early on a new platform is a great strategy. So if you're here, I highly recommend you take advantage of this rare opportunity to be early on a large platform, because there will be core needs that are not yet filled on Bixby that you could be the person who fills them. So I strongly recommend jumping on that opportunity. I also think, putting that aside, let's say that that's not on the table for you. You know, like, have a plan for how you're gonna get users. Seems fairly obvious, but most people think that if they build something good, people will find them, and it's just not true. And so I think that you either need to have a product that you think can make money, so then you can go spend that money on going and getting your customers, or you need to have a product that people inherently want to share with each other so that you can have organic growth, or both ideally. Or the third thing is you can have prominent placement in a key discovery channel like Samsung Bixby. So, yeah. Well, I'm just saying, like, other than those three strategies, there's not a lot of things I'm aware of that work. And so I definitely, being a startup founder who went through 3 years of failure, I will say I did not have a plan of how we were going to get users. And so I really recommend that beyond building a good product, you should have a plan for how you're going to get customers. And I do actually think this is a fairly unusual opportunity here, so I recommend it.
I think we have 5-6 minutes left. If anyone wants to ask questions, we have a mic over there so that everyone can hear the question.
Hello, thank you all for speaking. I want to go back to when we were talking about the design process and simplification. You guys talked about collapsing the number of options to 2 to 3 to make sure that the experience is really simple. And from my perspective, like the power of voice is actually like the ability to do everything in one query. I want to be able to say something like, hey, Bixby, what's my Uber rating? I don't want to be collapsed to 2 options like, oh, actually you have to choose between a pool and an XL first. So basically the question is, like, what's your perspective on like simplification, in my opinion, really limits the power of voice and makes it really similar to the mobile app where the designer is telling you which buttons you have to press in what order. So I just love your perspective on that.
I think a lot of it's a matter of prioritization, right? If you take the Uber example, Uber's goal is to increase the number of rides on the platform. And while it's great for you to be able to find out what your rating is, ultimately, that's not going to drive the bottom line for them. So I think for us, it was really about, yes, it'd be amazing to have every feature that's available on Pinterest today available via voice, but we needed to prioritize and make decisions and really focus on what was going to be the biggest use case when we were first launching this.
Yeah, I mean, I think the core of the Uber experience is getting an Uber. And so if you can build that on voice, I think you can go from there and layer on additional functionality and some of the cool voice features you're talking about. But if we were going to recommend that Uber launch a capsule, I think anyone here's recommendation would be you should be able to get an Uber really easily. And if you got that down, then the rest will come.
And it's easy to make that determination, right? Would you be more frustrated with not being able to get an Uber or not getting your rating?
Yeah.
Yeah, or just don't build it, and if people ask for it enough, then build it.
Yes?
Hi. So this is related to voice, but also just the overall Bixby brand recognition. So we get approached by a lot of startups that need funding or services, but Bixby is not in their development target at all. I bring it up, and they go, "What's Bixby?" So what was it? Can you come up with maybe one sentence that I could actually tell these people why they should at least start looking into adding yours to the dynamic duo of Microsoft and Apple? Because right now, again, the startups that we're seeing, they're not even have no idea Bixby's on the horizon. I want to get them changed, get innovation now, so they can be, moving forward with it. But they have no clue right now.
I think what you said before, it's such a big opportunity and getting in early. We power hundreds of experiences on Alexa, and the ones that did the best were the ones that started early. Like an order or two of magnitude difference.
I think what's really interesting about Bixby versus other voice platforms for Pinterest is that notion of output, right? So if you look at the rest of the space, the majority is around smart speakers. So voice is really the primary output, and that just doesn't work for Pinterest as a visual platform. So because Samsung has such a rich range of devices that will have Bixby enabled, and you can have that visual output across those devices, I think Bixby became a lot more compelling for us when compared to some of those other platforms.
And also to add to what Blake is saying, like 1-800-Flowers today is on Google Assistant as well as Amazon Alexa. But what set Bixby apart from the rest is really their developer studio. The ability to get something, to build something, to launch something and scale, I've seen nothing like that to date. And then the ability to switch on other devices such as the fridge, mobile device, your watch, that with one line of code, that's unheard of. So with that in mind, I think they're going to be able to scale much quicker than other developers. And with the developer community they have built that's growing essentially like 2 times, I think that's what they told us today, I think they're going to be much quicker than the others.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said you were consulting with startups. I think with large companies, you can come late to platforms. You can wait until they're established because everyone knows, what your product is and why they want it, and they'll figure out how to get to it wherever it is. I think if you are actually working with startups, I think that the only way to succeed as a startup is to have some fundamental disagreement with the world about what's important and what isn't. And so if everyone thinks Bixby is like, the #1 taking over the world already, it's probably too late for your startups to succeed there. And so I'm not saying it definitely will work, but I think in order for a startup to work, you have to have something of a contrarian angle on the future. And so, I don't know, we're excited about Bixby. I think that, we think the world will come around on that a little bit.